Today I'm going to show you how to make something like this into something like this. Stay tuned and I'll show you how I made this. As always, I will explain the tools and materials as they come up. First I have this gun. This is a Nerf Rebelle Fair Fortune Crossbow. I decided to mod this one because I couldn't find a decent modding guide online or even examples of a decently modified one. And I got it for about 10 bucks, which makes it a good starting project. This was my first try modding it, but I found out if the actual bow arms are attached, it's impossible to get them off again. So if you want to modify one, get a new one and don't attach the bow arms. So I start with disassembling the gun and start by undoing a knot using 2 screwdrivers, and then I use a small Phillips head screwdriver to take the gun apart. And be sure to collect all of the little bits and pieces in a container so you won't lose any. Once you have removed the screws, it's a bit fiddly to get the 2 halves of the housing apart. Eventually you'll see this, and at this point you should make a photograph of that so you know how to put it back together. The front bit I just took out is actually the important bit of the mechanism. It rotates the drum. Most of the pieces in the back are just for safety. If you don't really care about that, you can leave most of them out and have a simpler and more robust mechanism for it. Now I want a different handle. I want to put a wooden handle on it, so I use a saw, just hack it off. And I also don't really like these bow arms, so I hack them off as well, one side then the other. But this makes the modding process more difficult and also makes the gun function less reliably. So if you want a more easy modding process and more reliable gun, leave the grip and the bow arms on there and just work around them. Found a really old piece of cherry wood in my basement, and I will make a nice grip from that. Here I'm using a carpet knife, brake knife, and this like wiggling motion can actually cut through the plastic. And I use it to remove even more from the grip, so I have more space to get my wooden handle in there. Clean it up a bit, then do the other half. Here I'm using some coarse sandpaper, like 120 grit, on a sanding block to clean up the parts where I hacked off the bow arms. Give it a nice smooth surface. Next step is to grind off all the markings, all the brandings, all the safety markings to give the gun a cleaner look. And I started with the sanding block, but it's much easier with this sanding sponge. It has like 240 grit, and with the sponge I ground off all the markings, all the Nerf and Rebelle logos, and then continued to roughen up all of the surfaces that need to be painted later on. So some of the weapon internals will be visible from the outside, so I'm grinding those as well. The drum has these little nips in it, but I found out they are not actually needed to hold the darts in or anything. So I just cut them out, and that made it easier to sand the whole thing and later paint it. So my cherry wood handle to go in there like that, and I decided to grind it into shape, so using a breath mask, safety goggles, earbuds, and of course gloves. And then I start grinding the wood to shape, bit at a time, constantly checking and rechecking if it is the desired shape. And the process took me about 1 or 2 hours. So if you don't have the proper tools for this, or just don't want this much hassle, just leave the grip on there and try to modify it. This is the final grip design. They have like a groove in there so it fits into the body of the gun, and a little grind out the front so it does not interfere with the trigger. You can also see after 2 hours of grinding my face has marks from the breath mask, and I have become a mouth-breathing idiot. Before I start with the painting, I want to make sure that the surfaces are really clean of dust and grease, so I use cleaning gasoline to rub them all off. At this point I found out I have to cut off this little piece from the trigger guard so the handle fits in there properly. Now start the painting. Using breath protection and a black primer coating. Never mind the brand, it wasn't really good, it was the cheapest option available to me. But you need a primer so the actual paint will stick properly to the plastic. So I'm spraying it from quite far away. I want like a gentle mist to come down onto the pieces I'm painting, so I get a nice thin even coat of paint and don't have like any paint noses or drops on there. But that means I need to do several coats of paints till it's all covered, and each coat of paint I had to dry overnight because it was really cold in my workshop. So after I have a few layers of paint on here, I'm turning all of the pieces around so I get the color onto every surface I need painted. And on this side, of course, I do a few layers as well. Now comes the fun part, playing with colors. This is some miniature paint in bronze, gold and silver. I'm starting with the bronze one. I'm using a white, soft brush, fine hair brush, and just a piece of cardboard to mix my paint. And what I'm doing here is a dry brush technique. So I get some paint in my brush, and then I get most of it out again. The brush is almost dry. And then I just start first by reassembling the body, so it becomes easier to paint. Then I start gently brushing over the surface. And what this does is that at every edge and every protrusion there will be more color than in the lower parts of the body. And this will give the gun an old and weathered look. and I'll just shut up for the moment and let the maestro work his magic. You can see how this really brings out the structure of the gun. Here I'm mixing my second color, silver, and I will do the dry brush technique on the parts of the gun that were silver before painting. That is mainly the frame, the cage around the drum. And I also used the silver paint on these grip pieces for the racking mechanism. For my final color I use gold. I just need a little bit of it. Then for a few seconds I'm contemplating using another brush for this, or even my very thin brushes, and do like a pinstripe, just highlight the engravings on the gun. But I decided against it, and I just do a gentle dry brush on these elaborate design here, just to highlight it a bit and make it pop out from the quite dark rest of the gun. On the front as well. After this has dried, I'm using clear coat, silk smooth matte clear coat, and once again I have to do several layers of this, so everything is painted. Now it's time to reassemble your gun. Hope you still have your picture and you didn't spend 2 months on another project since you disassembled it, so you know where everything goes. Or you will need, like me, 3 tries and will have to fish out some of the little bits out of your trash bin. So, but finally I managed to reassemble it and the mechanism works, and I used some silicone spray to lubricate the mechanism. Now I'm screwing it all back together. Little bit more silicone spray on the rail there. And the testing showed the mechanism worked. Now I'm using a 2-component epoxy glue to glue in the wooden handle. As always, make sure your surfaces are touched by sanding paper, are rough, and that they are clean of dust and grease. So once again, use your cleaning gasoline and mix that 2-component glue thoroughly and apply it on the inside of the body here. Make sure not to glue any of the actual mechanics together, and then also apply it on the wooden handle. Get that in there and then make sure it is straight. And for drying, I put it into my tool basket like that. At this point it already looks pretty good. And if you don't want to shoot it, if you want it just for the looks, like for cosplay, you can leave it at that and skip the next part. So while fiddling with it, I made the original bowstring too short, so I bought a new one, and it's like 3mm thick elastic cord. And because I got rid of the bow arms, I'll have to drill some holes in here where I can actually run the cord through and fasten it. So I'm drilling 2 sets of holes. Blow out some of the plastic bits. This is my first hole. Now I put a second hole right in front of it. I've run the elastic cord through one of the holes, and I make a simple knot in the end here so it can't slip out again. Then I'm using a gas lighter to burn off the end of the cord so it won't become undone. After that, I'm trying out how long the cord needs to be. So when it is pulled back, it still has to be able to reach the firing mechanism. And then I need a bit of cord to fill it through the body and to knot it off. And I use my trusty brake knife to cut it off. And as always, it's easier to shorten it later than it is to make a longer one. So this is a bit longer than it needs to be. If I want to, I can always pull a bit more out of one hole, do another knot in it, and I will get a stronger gun. Oh, almost finished. Finishing touch is using some linseed oil on the wooden handle, and that really makes the grain structure of this piece of cherry pop out. Gives it a nice look. This is the finished gun. And it still works. If you like this video and want to see more like it, please subscribe to my channel and let me know in the comments below. Thanks and goodbye.